Village Slobudka, not far from the town of Pruzhany in the Brest region, is certainly not a typical or popular tourist destination in Belarus, but it is something that has meaning for me personally. My dad was a military doctor in the military unit there back in the early 80s, and now it was important for me to visit this place. So, one day, I took a bus from Brest to Pruzhany, and from there got a taxi to take me to the village Slobudka and show me around the former military town and military unit. Can you imagine that there have been Tsarist generals, Austrians and Germans, Polish lancers, Soviet tankmen, and nuclear missiles here? In this town, there is evidence of different eras: the Russian Empire, the First World War, the Soviet-Polish War, and Belarus being part of Poland, the Second World War, history of the USSR. The village of Slobodka nearby Pruzhany has had a civil status for a little over 10 years, and before that, for 115 years, only people in uniform lived here. The entire infrastructure was built for them: houses, barracks, arena, church, and even a casino. The first impression when you enter this former military town is created by the standard panel houses of this military project. But this town has a very interesting story. This burgundy red house, for example, began to be built back in 1894. The town was started from scratch. Until that time, there was nothing here. Red brick was used for barracks, officers' houses, stables, warehouses. Some parts of the red bricks were transported from the Brest fortress, and then production was set up near Pruzhany. The town was first called the Artillery Barracks, and since 1900s, Mikhailovsky headquarters, in honor of the Grand Duke Mikhail Romanov, the chief of artillery of the Russian army. This house was built in the town, one of the first ones. Unfortunately, most of the buildings from those years have not survived. They were destroyed in the 1970s during the reconstruction of the military unit. The artillery unit stood here for almost 20 years until the First World War. In 1915, the barracks were occupied by the Germans and Austrians. They were not destroyed in their haste of retreat. Now the town became known as Pruzhany Camp. It was used as a training center. A bunker and a mine gallery were built for training. After World War I, there was a Soviet-Polish War, after which the town was occupied by the Polish artillery and lancers for 18 years. They began to call it Pruzhany Garrison, Artillery Barracks, or Koszary. By the end of the 1920s, with the efforts of the military and local residents, the appearance of Koszary changed. In this yellow wooden building, gambling Polish lancers used to gather gambling tables, and for more than 60 years there has been a kindergarten now. What a change, right? On March 23, 1939, the Polish artillery regiments in Koszary were put on alert and moved westward. They did not come back. In September, the Second World War began. On September 19th, Red Army units were already stationed in Koszary. Families of Polish soldiers were able to leave the garrison. After the liberation from the Germans in 1944, 10 military hospitals were located in the town. The garrison turned into a large medical town. To solve the housing problem, in 1956, 15 one-story standard brick houses were built on the outskirts of the town. This part of the garrison first received the popular name Berbegubovka. After a while, they began to call it Shanghai. While the missile brigade was in Slobudka, the town was seriously reconstructed. All wooden buildings were demolished, including housing and barracks. Along the outer perimeter, the garrison was surrounded by a typical concrete fence, this so-called Tretyakov, from the name of the commander Tretyak. The living area was separated from the location of the parts by the same fence. The town was closed. It was possible to enter its territory only with passes. In the summer of 1966, the missile brigade was transferred from the group of Soviet troops in Germany to the military town of Slobodka. While the missile brigade was in Slobodka, the town underwent a major reconstruction and its appearance was completely changed. To equip the town, funds were spent on the construction of 4 or 5-story panel houses for military families. Along with the appearance of new objects, the destruction of old ones proceeded. All wooden buildings were demolished, including housing and barracks. Since the mid-1980s, the international situation in the world has changed. The carrying out of perestroika in the Soviet Union and the proclamation of new political thinking contributed to the warming of relations between the USSR and the United States. The states have signed a number of treaties aimed at reducing and disarming armies. One of these documents was the 1987 Soviet-American Treaty on the elimination of intermediate-range and shorter-range missiles. On September 12, 1988, the Slobudka rocket operations base officially ceased to exist, and the missile divisions were disbanded. The collapse of the Soviet army led to the reduction of troops and the massive dismissal of officers. With the formation of the Independent Republic of Belarus, national armed forces were created on the basis of the Belarusian military district. During the collapse of the USSR, there was an oversaturation of troops in Slobodka. At the beginning of 1992, in a solemn atmosphere, the servicemen of the Slobodka garrison took the oath of allegiance to Belarus. The units introduced the study of the Belarusian language, which many, especially the officers, did not know. Most of those dismissed in Slobodka stayed in the town. The garrison was gradually transferred to a reduced composition. Part of the military equipment was put into long-term storage. In addition to reducing the military, the process of disbanding units began. While in the early 1990s, the number of people in the military town was extremely large, then in the early 2000s, the units already had reduced staff. There were not enough people even to maintain the necessary order. The barracks began to collapse, the premises of which were empty. Since 2007, the military town Slobudka ceased to be a garrison and came under the jurisdiction of the Pruzhany region. Since that time, the settlement has become a single object called the Slobudka village. As soon as the last military unit left the town, looting began. They began to loot the equipment of barracks and storage facilities, removed concrete fences, dug up communication cables, pulled out electrical wiring and lighting lines. Life goes on though. Today, a kindergarten is not empty, which has already turned more than 65 years old, and the building is more than a century old. In 1994, a new school appeared, in which children from Slobudka and the outskirts study. In the former military part of the village, living conditions are not different from those in the city. Slobudka, though, can become a real decoration of the Pruzhany region, an important point on the tourist map, because it preserves the original monuments of military architecture of the 19th, 20th centuries, Polish and Soviet times. Since I was already near Pruzhany, I decided to take a small taxi ride around the town as I didn't have a lot of time to spend there. So let's just take a quick drive around the town. One thing I noticed was the number of memorials and places commemorating those who fought in the Great Patriotic War, as well as in the war in Afghanistan. Here is an unusual monument, on a marble block of which it's written, "To the pilot, deputy commander of the squadron of the 33rd Fighter Aviation Regiment, Senior Lieutenant Gudimov Stepan Mitrofanovich, who committed an air ram on June 22, 1941 at 5:20 a.m. From grateful descendants. This is also the place where my dad took a picture about 40 years ago. Here is the Catholic Church. It is Pruzhany where the Muchavets River originates. At the confluence of the Mucha River and the Vets Canal, today there is a stela, the confluence of female and male figures. Then Muchavets flows toward Brest, where it flows into the western Bug River on the territory of the Brest fortress. These are stone walls of the 19th century, which are still used for their intended purpose. And here is the main attraction of the city, a museum estate, Pruzhansky Pałacyk. An English-style park was laid around the estate. Among the chaotically planted trees, there are canals, a pond, and a small building of the former greenhouse. Once you are in Brest, it is worth visiting Pruzhany with its former military town Slobudka. I was so happy I was able to do it. However, ideally, one should spend at least one full day here. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to see more of my travels around the world.